The mad lads have actually done it. Games Workshop are going to be having an official Warhammer World Champion. And weirdly, I think this might be how they fight back a little bit against 3D printing. Let me explain. So here's the article that was posted today announcing the World Championship of Warhammer. And the games they are picking are Warhammer 40k, Age of Sigmar, Kill Team, and Warhammer Underworlds. A noticeable admission there of 2 games, namely Horus Heresy and Warcry. However, they probably make sense, but I wonder what that means for Warhammer Fantasy when it does return. So the article talks about for the past 2 years they had the US Open series, and that had its finale at the end of each season. However, behind the scenes, the Warhammer events team has been working on this with a community of independent organisers. Now that's going to be very interesting. So the end of this year, it's going to be it's going to culminate in the World Championships of Warhammer. That's going to be a pretty hype moment, right? And it's going to take place in Atlanta, Georgia in the USA from November 16th to November 19th. So you might be wondering, how do you qualify if you are that way inclined? Well, qualifying players will come from official Warhammer events like the US Open, Warhammer Fest, as well as independent events like Las Vegas Open, Adepticon and the London GT, as well as Nova Open and other major events. The plan is to have 170 qualifier slots, 18 countries, 3 continents. So they're going to be announcing their own US Open series next week. Tickets are going to go on sale in early February. Tickets for one of the events at Adepticon go on sale this weekend. So if you're in the US and you want to do that, crack on. What's interesting is that it says each event will have their own qualifying criteria determined by the individual organisers. So it sounds like you're going to have a little bit of scope, depending on who organises it, to be a little bit different from, say, like a standard GW pack. So it says at official Warhammer events, players might qualify through competitive-centric Best Generalship Award, or more rounded, like Best Overall, which also includes painting and hobby skills. If I ever had dreams of becoming a world champion, which I 100% do not because I'm just not good enough, then that last bit is like fear in my heart. I do not have any good skills when it comes to hobby or painting. Now this is where it gets a little bit interesting for me. How does my local tournament become a qualifying event? Well, it's not too late to become a qualifying event for the 2023 World Championship. If you run a large or long-running tournament or convention for your Warhammer community and you would like to be considered for qualifier status, fill in this form. Now, the main thing here is that this doesn't seem to be including just general tournaments at hobby stores, right? Which I think is maybe a step that they're not willing to take yet. But maybe if you have a tournament at a store that's near you, maybe you could actually become a qualifying event, which would be very interesting to see. So what does all of this have to do with 3D printing? Well, for me, it's pretty simple, right? I think Games Workshop are announcing the Championship of Warhammer because they are trying to dictate a competitive scene, and obviously with that they can then dictate what models you guys are actually going to use, and that will presumably exclude the possibility of using 3D printed stuff. I'm guessing somewhere within all of these rule packs, whoever's actually organizing these events, it will probably quite clearly say, hey, you cannot use a majority 3D printed army. A lot of these places actually already do it because of reasons of like, hey, we're trying to make money or we want to please Games Workshop already. But to go for the Warhammer like Championship, you're obviously going to need a official GW army. And if they can make that more and more appealing to more and more players, then obviously that will get more and more people buying GW instead of 3D printing. In practice, will that actually happen? Well, my instinct says no. I don't think this necessarily goes far enough just yet. This is sort of more of the same from GW. They've already been effectively working with these major conventions and tournaments to effectively put their name on it. Them simply making an official scene doesn't really do much just yet. But over the years, this might start adding up. If this becomes more and more lucrative, maybe they actually get a massive prize pool involved. Maybe it gets really heavily streamed on Twitch and people watch it like from all around the world. It gets people into the hobby and all that kind of good stuff. It could be a really big selling point for GW. Typically, they've not really been a competitive company, right? I don't think anybody would necessarily say that. And whilst they have got better in recent years, this for me I think is actually a big change. They have more often than not focused on the hobby side of things, and that's probably where the money is actually being made. However, as 3D printing starts taking more and more of that hobby side of stuff, GW are probably realizing that the actual gamers who actually play with their stuff, if they're playing at a GW event, they will need GW models. Hey, we got you boys. A little bit like Star Wars, right? It's perhaps less of an issue at a FFG tournament because you actually need all the bits and bobs. But if you go to a qualifier for Star Wars Legion, most of the people already have Star Wars Legion models, they've not 3D printed it, right? And that's because you need all the cards and stuff like that anyway. Nobody's just gone digital with it. However, Games Workshop would have to like drastically change how they sell their game for that to be a acceptable thing. But what they can do is if they run their own tournaments, they can say, hey, you can only use GW stuff. So it's a small step. I don't think it's necessarily how they're fighting back long term, but I do think it's actually probably part of the reason, as well as the competitive scene just getting bigger over time, right? However, if you are a Warhammer Fantasy fan, which I am including myself in that category, the list of games here may not immediately strike you as concerned. Well, Warhammer Horus Heresy is missing from this list. Now, is Warhammer Horus Heresy a fourth game? Well, it doesn't seem like GW are necessarily treating it as such. Perhaps they don't want it to encroach on Warhammer 40k World Champion. I do think that Age of Sigmar and Fantasy will be so drastically different that it may get added to this and they may not even worry about it. But I just thought it was interesting that Horus Heresy was missed here. Kill Team I think is a classic good choice. Somebody like Glass Half Dead will be very happy about that. Warhammer Underworlds, I think that game is probably bigger than I realize. It's got this sort of weird hybrid of card players and, you know, people who play card games and those kind of stuff and miniature games. I'm not really interested in it personally, so I don't really follow it, but I'm presuming it's actually quite big, right? Otherwise it would be a weird addition to this. I'm a little bit surprised they don't have Warcry, but maybe it makes sense. Maybe Warcry is actually a little bit too chaotic. So GW are doing it. They're actually going to have a world champion 40k player. That sounds crazy, but I actually really like it as an idea. It's nice to see them do this now. I would have loved to have seen them do it a few years ago. Obviously they have been more and more supporting events, but it's nice to see them really commit to it. And I'm hoping we'll actually get more and more Warhammer Fantasy tournaments that are official GW tournaments when it comes around. And we'll talk about that impact when we talk about 3D printing fantasy armies at some point. Big shout out to Clint, my one and only Patreon right now. But if you want to support me, the link is in the description below. Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.